We will be recording this evening and posting the recording later to the Pendle Hill USA YouTube channel. My colleague Francisco Burgos and I will be spotlighting just the speakers during that time, so you will not show up on the recording, but I did just want to let you know that we will be recording tonight. And so if you have concerns about being recorded and would prefer to keep your video off, just wanted to let you know about that. A couple other technical logistics for tonight. You may notice that you are unable to unmute yourself. We do have that set for this first part of this evening so that our speakers can really be heard clearly. There are a lot of us here on Zoom. So we have it set up so you will not be able to unmute yourself or be able to chat to each other in the chat box for most of this evening. I've talked with our speakers ahead of time, and for the question and answer later tonight, we will open it up so that you can use those features later. So that will be possible later, but just to let you know how we have that set up for right now. As I said, as folks were gathering, my name is Lena Blunt. I'm the education coordinator here at Pendle Hill, and I am delighted to formally welcome you to our May 1st Monday lecture. I'm really, really pleased to have with us tonight Ms. Mary Norman, Wendy Sanford, and Melchor Quick Hall. The three of them will be speaking to us on reflections on These Walls Between Us, a memoir of friendship across race and class. Melchor Quick Hall is the author of Naming a Transnational Black Feminist Framework, Writing in Darkness, and is a co-editor with Gwen Kirk of Mapping Gendered Ecologies, Engaging with and Beyond Eco-Womanism and Ecofeminism. She's a popular educator who works with students of all ages, and through Pendle Hill, she co-facilitates an annual writing workshop for people of color with Joanne Daly and Danny Ocean Jackson, and a reparations workshop for and with US-based white inheritors of wealth. Ms. Mary Norman grew up in rural southwestern Virginia during the years of Jim Crow threats to the life and well-being of African American citizens. She joined the Great Migration by traveling north for work. Ms. Mary worked part-time as a domestic worker for Wendy's parents and other affluent white families in Princeton, New Jersey over several decades. And during a long career in corrections, Ms. Mary became the first female officer in the Mercer County, New Jersey correctional system and rose to the rank of lieutenant. She later mentored several women who, with her support, followed her path to officer status. Ms. Mary tended to both of Wendy's parents in the last months of their lives and moved back home to provide expert care for her own mother and stepfather during their last years. Ms. Mary and Wendy have been creating a friendship for more than 65 years. Wendy Samford grew up in an upper middle class white suburban family in Princeton, New Jersey. During the socially turbulent 1970s, she became a feminist, a lesbian, and a Quaker. A founding member of the Boston Women's Health Book Collective, Wendy co-authored and edited many versions of Our Bodies, Ourselves, the Women's Health and Sexuality Classic. In her 50s, she began to reckon with her own white skin and the benefits that came to her through being white. Wendy wrote These Walls Between Us, a memoir of friendship across race and class, to honor the long friendship between Mary Norman and herself, and to trace for readers the work and learning that helped her become a more dependable friend. Wendy and Polly Atwood, her spouse of 42 years, are members of Friends Meeting at Cambridge in Massachusetts. I now invite all of us to take a moment of silence to settle in, and then I will pass things over to Melchor, Ms. Mary, and Wendy.
So I would just say welcome to everyone. I'm excited to be here with Wendy Samford and Miss Mary Norman. And so what we thought is that we would talk about the book through a series of themes. And and then later on, we'll invite you to sort of talk to us and ask questions sort of through the lens of those themes. And so um, we're going to have Wendy start, but then we'll each of us will talk a little bit about our reflections on the book and invite you to think about um, again several themes with us as well. So Wendy, do you want to begin with helping us think about co-creation?
Yes, thanks, Melchor. I just want to thank Pendle Hill for having us. This is very exciting for us, and to Melchor for moderating. And moderating is so little a word compared to what the three of us talk about and hope to share with you tonight. And then my gratitude always to Mary Norman, my friend for so many years. And we're getting so old now, which we talk about just about every week. And to Polly Atwood, who can't be here tonight, but has done so much towards this book. And so yes, the theme of co-creation. So as Lena said a bit, Mary and I met actually in the kitchen of a summer cottage that my parents had rented for the first time. And Mary had traveled all the way from southwestern Virginia to be my mother's helper, to be a domestic worker, kind of a first summer helper for my mother. And we came from really different worlds, just totally different worlds, which Mary knew and I didn't exactly. And some of the book is about what I might have known and didn't, and then finally learned through many experiences with Mary, and also with books that helped me understand. For instance, when Mary came at age 15 to work as a domestic worker in my mother's kitchen, there was stuff going on that I was not aware of at the time at all, in terms of both where she came from, what she had to go through coming up as by herself from the South, and also what the rules of domestic service were, including that she was still supposed to learn everything about me, and I wasn't invited to learn anything about her by the rules of domestic service. So we've spent 65 years trying to turn the tables on that, I think, or at least 40 years. The first 25 went more according to those restrictions and constrictions. The book came about because Mary started, she came back to help my mother, even after she had full-time work in corrections. And Mary, we'll talk about this in a sec. I won't go on and on, but then all of a sudden, fast forward to where I think we're in our 30s at that point, and I have become a feminist, as you read, Lena, a feminist, lesbian, and a Quaker. I'm not a lesbian yet in those first moments, but very interested, right, working on our bodies ourselves. And Mary was leading the way in corrections at the time in that section of New Jersey for women, we were both divorced, and we were both single parents and making our way in the world, and very different worlds, but each making our way and making our mark, as we have recently talked about. And we certainly had much more in common than we did with my parents and their life on this very secluded New England, Nantucket beachfront. And we started walking together and talking about our lives. And that was, do you want Mary, do you want to say anything about that moment when we first started walking, or why a few years later you suggested we write a book?
No, excuse me. No, they were just pleasant times that we spent walking on the beach, and as the years went by, we got closer and discussing our lives and our ups and downs and what we wanted in life. So that's when I said to you, Wendy, why don't we write a book? Go on Oprah.
Go on, Oprah.
Yes, and she had the television show where she did book clubs, and so remember we planned what we wear. And all of that was great fun. So that's how all of that came about. And I said people probably would not believe that we are friends or as close as we are just based on our backgrounds are so different.
I remember that moment. And so I earnestly set out to, and this is part of the white upper class conditioning that I had to reckon with later on, was I set out to write our book because I figured I had majored in English. I was a writer. Mary was working 3 jobs all the time to take care of her family. And it took many years and many efforts for me to understand that I alone couldn't write our book. And so in the end, you'll see my name is, my name is on the front of the book as the author, because it's my story about a white person in the context of a friendship that's deepening, beginning to understand what all the obstacles, that many of which were in my awareness or my lack of awareness. And some of the books that my mentors in print who helped me understand more and more. So it ends up, in all honesty, being my story, and yet for it not to be a typical white person's story using a Black person's life to talk about her own, which Toni Morrison warned us about very strongly in her essays in Playing in the Dark. I set out to just have Mary be as much in the book as possible. And we had many things that didn't work. Interviews, I wasn't a very good interviewer. And then remember, you took tapes home and a tape recorder, and you were going to tape yourself as though you had hours and hours of discretionary time to
Yeah, I remember that didn't work.
No, it didn't. It didn't. So I started taking notes on every time we got together, every time we talked on the phone. I just took notes. And it's actually been, Mary and I have said, a great relief that I'm not taking notes anymore on our conversations. But for a good 40 years, I was taking notes. 30 years, I was taking notes. So now if Mary wants to remember when something happened, she asked me, because I wrote it down. Not that I remember in my mind, but I wrote it down. And so the co-creation was both in question and answer. The co-creation was the co-creation of our friendship, in which there were things I would say or do that were truly, we would understand today as microaggressions, coming out of my ignorance and oblivion and white solipsism. And so there were many different moments that I talk about in the book that we could have just, the friendship could have ended, but that's a lot to speaks for you, Mary, and your patience. And for instance, I decided, I learned the term workaholic at some point, and I decided Mary was a workaholic because she worked 3 jobs, and I used to lecture her a little bit about do you have to do, couldn't you just not do this job for my mother? Or, it's like you're working yourself to the bone. Well, you were. And I, coming from an affluent background, I had no concept about people who are working class and living in poverty, who have to use every available moment to work. I was just so ignorant. And so I was telling you, you were workaholic, and you've told me that you had to be very patient with that. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I did, because there was just no way that you could understand. Because say in 75, I had two sons, and their father died in 75. So it was just the three of us, and before I remarried. But then usually I find marriages, when you have children already, usually doesn't work very well. So, which mine didn't. So that's how I ended up being divorced again, because naturally my children came first.
Mhm.
So, and enjoying that and having a house, and you have a car, then you have two children, and they need everything. And so you didn't understand that, because I think if your parents was any assistance that you needed, you could go there. But that wasn't the case with my parents, although my mother, she tried, but they just really didn't have the resources.
Mhm. Yeah.
It
So-
always amazed me that it was seven of us, it was seven children, and I can remember my stepfather was making $15 a week, and we survived.
Mhm. And you said that your sons never knew that how much you struggled to support them and feed them, and how hard you were working. And I remember you're being really proud of that.
But they did pick up. They both very work oriented, and like my oldest son is getting ready to the first job he was on for 20 years, and now he's getting ready to retire in 2 years off of another job that is 20 years. And my other son has opened up his own business, and it's doing well. And even with the struggles that he found out, that there is struggle in life in trying to start a business, and it's just really hard work. And so I'm really happy that they remembered the struggle. So, can I just tell you one really cute story? It was a really bad time, and so we were having what you would call gravy, brown gravy, which you make out of water. I think you are aware of that. So we was having that for about 3 nights, and my oldest son said, "Mommy, how long are we gonna have to eat this gravy?" So that was funny. I think he was small, but I think he remembers that.
You're muted, Wendy.
I know, we live on a train track. We live on a train track, so I turn it off every time the train goes by. Then I forget. I wanted to say one more thing about co-creation and then go to the next topic, because it's related to the next topic, which is following a leading. So there were 2 technological developments that helped us co-create the book. And one was texting. So Mary and I both got smartphones, eventually and learned how to use them. And at a certain point, and during the pandemic, we first year of the pandemic, we talked on the phone every day and sometimes texted also every day, just to support each other through it. And finally, Mary said, why don't you just ask me any questions you want to, and I'll answer them. Because until then, with my taking notes on everything Mary said, all that Mary said in the book came through my ears. And with texting, all of a sudden, we'd go back to sections of the book that didn't have enough of her voice. I just wanted her to be the complex, amazing person, character that she is, and not just be flat on the page. And so with texting, more and more of her voice got into the book. And it was still my questions, but it was really her voice through texting. And so that was, it's I've thought, because the book took 30 years because I kept having to try it and then realize, oops, that doesn't, it doesn't work. And then Black Lives Matter came out and I realized how different it had to be. And then I read Ta-Nehisi Coates and realized I had a whole other way of looking at the wedding, my first wedding, and at equity issues. A book kept just changing and getting longer and getting better. And fortunately, it took so long that then technological advances happened and we had texting. And then it's lucky it got better at that point, because by then we were so old, the book couldn't get any better. We had to get it out if we were still going to be alive. So it's just really lucky texting came along when it did. So I'm grateful for that. And the other thing is Zoom. You should have seen us the first time. We could have been on Zoom the whole time during the pandemic and we didn't think of it. And then our first interview, remember, with Pam Brooks last summer, we got Professor Pam Brooks. She got us on Zoom together. And the first time we saw each other since the pandemic started, we had to cry first and then we did the interview. But that's allowed us to co-create this aspect of the book, which turns out to be just as significant as writing the book, which is spreading the word and letting people know about it and ask questions they want to ask about it. So Zoom has allowed us to co-create this piece of it, as we are doing with Melchor tonight. So there's other stuff to say about co-creation, but I'm grateful that you suggested that topic, Melchor. And should I go on to the second one? We each took on two topics.
Feel free, yeah.
Okay, so I wrote this. I continued this project under a leading, and I wanted to tell you that the seed for this leading was sown at a Friends General Conference summer gathering when Reverend James Lawson spoke with us. And I don't know how many of you were there. Might have been in Iowa. I don't know which of the many summer gatherings I've been fortunate to be at. It was at, but he spoke with us and he said, unless the white community breaks its silence and determines that race is not a peripheral issue, but an issue central to the things that we say are valuable to America, the finest movement in the world will not cause racism to cease. So unless the white community breaks its silence, and that he sowed a seed for me. And partway through, maybe 10 years into working on this book that Mary had suggested, I understood more and more that this was my leading in the book, to break the silence, and to do something different from like what The Help did. The novel The Help, in which a white woman tried to talk about these issues and somehow made herself the hero of the book, made herself the hero of an incredibly important civil rights movement that white people were so not the heroes of. That was my leading. And there's several things. I want to read you one sentence about leadings from London Yearly Meeting. Meeting for Sufferings in 1992. They said, the ground of our work lies in waiting on and listening for the Spirit. Let the loving Spirit of a loving God call and lead us. These leadings are both personal and corporate. If they are truly tested in a gathered meeting, or for an individual with a clearness group, my beloved clearness and support group, we shall find that the strength and the courage for obedience are given to us. We need the humility to put obedience before our own wishes. And, I think Spirit used my ambition. It wasn't that I haven't been ambitious for this project, because I was. And that's part of what kept me at it. And part of it was just, every once in a while I'd pray and I'd say, can I drop this now? It's being so hard and I'm not getting it right. And I'm not doing Mary justice. And it's too much about me. And please, can I let this leading go? And I never once got a yes, never. So I just kept at it. And then we lasted long enough for texting to come along and all these amazing books that I got to read and weave into the book. So the leading did carry me through some of those more difficult times. And wait a sec. Oh, yeah, there are my notes. I had a clearness and support committee. Okay, thank you for a time check. So I can, if someone has a question later about the leading, I don't want to go on and on. So I had a clearness and support group that are still with me today. Some of you, I think, who are here tonight. I just was able to surrender to the leading during many setbacks, including that no publishers or agents were interested in this book at all. And I don't blame them, because it looks like it fits a trope of white people writing about the Black people who raised them and gave them half their lives, and still somehow centering the white person. No publishers would take it. It was too risky. And then the last time I needed to really lean on the leading was when I realized that writing a book is only the start. You then have to spread the word, and that's called promotion. And that's so not me. So, but then look what happens. Melchor reads the book. She comes along. We're spreading the word. And Mary and I have this whole project now. So it's like way is opening, continuing to open. So that's all I'll say about the leading. And Melchor next with Mary.
Yeah. So and I'll just and we can always interrupt each other about these, but so one of the clear themes about this book is one about friendship, and especially in the among friends, capital F. We thought it would be important to talk about friendship, and especially Miss Mary. We talked about in our conversation before this convening, we talked about thinking about how you've thought about your friendship with Wendy. And in particular, I going back over the book and thinking about two different things. And for those of you who have the book, I would just mention the page number so that you can know where I am when I'm thinking about the book. But there's a section on around page 185 where Wendy sort of becomes aware that she is glad that she can show that she has a Black friend. And they're out to the theater. And I so I was thinking about friendship in that context. And I was thinking about you reading that and how, I feel like I know that about some of my relationships, but I haven't read it, in anything that any of my friends has published. And so I wonder, and then I'll say that was one thing that I was thinking about. And also the epilogue was another thing that I was thinking about when I was thinking about your friendship. And I'll just read this part that is a quote from a November 2020 phone call, where Miss Mary, you say, "We couldn't have said friend at the beginning. It took years to get where we are. If you hadn't been a curious person, you still wouldn't know my world. you would just now maybe be trying to figure it out, wondering, what do they want? If you had been different, we would never have been good friends. And so I just think about those two things, about, you know, sort of where the curiosity took Wendy and how it was reading about these different, her maturation in your friendship, to be quite, you know, straightforward.
Wendy was just reading about like people in books and what they were doing. She didn't really know. And she was extremely curious about everything that I was doing back then. And so I was like, oh, okay, we'll talk about this and we'll talk about that. And that's, and finally it just evolved into, wow, she's genuine. And that's how the barrier was completely broken, where before it was employer's daughter being curious. And so I had to deal with her as being an employee of her mother. And she would come to my room all the time, and she wanted to talk about my life. And so I would tell her, is, you know, we gotta work, we gotta do this. And how it was living in southwestern part of Virginia at that particular time was not a great place to be. And so it was like she just hung on to every word. And so that's eventually we just formed a friendship. And then later on, years later, you know, I visited her at her home. She visited me, and we were just back and forth and always on the telephone. So it just really, that is the part of color stopped. You know, I wasn't thinking, oh, well, Wendy's a white person. I don't think she thought of me. Oh, well, Mary's a Black person. It was just my friend. You know, I notice a lot of white people will say, they'll say, oh, my friend, I have a Black friend. I've never heard Wendy say that. So.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's interesting because in a way, you know, there are parts where she admits a little bit of that, right? You know, but one of the things, and I say, so earlier you said part of the reason why the book was important to write was because people might be sort of surprised by the friendship.
Exactly.
And in a way, I mean, I can see why Wendy would become your friend. I mean, and I don't mean, you know, not to take it away from the two sides of it, because you were sort of holding together the family in a way, right? I mean, you're sort of you know, helping to maintain her parents' relationships in some ways, and, you know, sort of holding together that part. But I think part of what was more curious was why you decided to, you know, sort of engage the curiosity in the way that you did.
Well, it just happened, actually. For me to say specifically a time or incident, I really can't, because, well, actually, when she was young, I had encountered white people who weren't very pleasant, and she always was. And as we got older, we just easily fell into talking with each other. So that's how that really came about.
Could I add one thing, Mary?
Sure.
So I remember, if you picture us out on that beach where Mary was only allowed out in the daytime on the beach in uniform, and was only white people. And I think you saw maybe one other Black person the whole summer you were there, and that was your cousin. And at one point, much later on, I said, Mary, why do you really think we became friends? And she said, well, you were the only person out there. So I think loneliness on both our parts is a part of what drew us together.
Yes, well, that's true. There, other than the conversations with your mother as to what she wanted done or whatever, all the rest of my time was, after finishing that, was to, I just had books.
Yeah.
So and during that 4 months, books were my friend too. When you would be out, it would sort of like you would come in from sailing or whatever, and so she would come in and stop in my room, and she wanted to tell me about it, and I just loved the time that she first got infatuated with a boy.
Yeah, we used to talk about love affairs a little bit. And then what was so wild is when I fell in love with Polly, I didn't tell you for a whole year because I was afraid you grew up in a more conservative religion, that you might judge me. Well, the whole time, as you know, Melchor, the whole time she knew, she
Yes.
figured it out from just day one. And I thought I was hiding it from her very successfully. And you were worried that I wasn't hiding it from my parents well.
Well, you were doing fairly well, but Polly wasn't. She would just look at Wendy as if to the stars in the sky. And I said to Wendy, I said, you need to tell Polly not to be looking at you like that. Will you? You know?
We still talk about it. We talk about looking at each other like that.
We'll make sure
But what
Polly
an-
watches this recording.
But what an insult to Mary. What I brought it up was, what an insult to Mary that I would not tell her this really important thing about me because I was afraid of homophobia. And I was afraid of her also of your knowing something that you shouldn't tell my mother, because you and mom were so close. So, but it was so great once. Well, once I told you, you said, I've known it for a year. And then you said, tell Polly not to look at you like that. So,
Yes. Because you didn't want to tell your mother, and really, that was not my place to do something like that. I never would have.
exactly. It was an insult to you that I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm a type of person, I don't judge. And so I wasn't judging you as with my upbringing. And a Methodist church is like, oh, you're in sin. But I just always felt, well, that's your business.
There you go. You see why we're friends.
So the other thing, other than thinking about friendship, there's a sort of interesting irony with the book title, and I don't know if you thought about this, but these walls between us, and then thinking about prison walls and your work in the corrections. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but much of there are periods where you're working in corrections and you're taking off to do care for the family. And I wonder if you could just say something you'd mentioned in some of your previous conversations. There were some thoughts unsaid about corrections and race. And I'll just, again, for people who have the book and are sort of thinking about where I'm looking in the book, I'm looking at pages 284 and 285, including a section where it says, even as Mary took her oath as the first female officer and later the first female lieutenant in the Mercer County Correction System, Her characteristic approach to working with inmates, fair, firm, humane, consistent, and emphasizing rehabilitation, was becoming a relic. The white man who took over the correction center as warden in the 1980s, Mary would clearly have been a better candidate for the job, subscribed 100% to the new, more punitive approach to incarceration. Through him, a massively harmful nationwide shift invaded Mary's workplace, poisoned her working conditions, and eventually made her job intolerable.
Well, that's true. I was a lieutenant at the time, and I just always felt that you should treat people humanely, and it upsets me when I see that that's not being done. And during that, in the very beginning, when I first started, it was because I needed a job, and I found a job. And so the paycheck was the most interesting thing to me in the very beginning. And then I just, as you may know, I'm a caregiver. Only thing I didn't realize it then at the time, that I really care and what people are doing, and you have to listen to people incarcerated. I mean, it's a lot of people don't understand. It's a lot of repeat coming and going through the system. And I think a lot of that is a lot of people, families that have loved ones that unfortunately have done something to be incarcerated. And when they come out, it's really a difficult period. Most of the time the family is like, well, you got to get a job and support yourself. Well, it really takes time for a person coming out of the system, because all of a sudden you finally free again. There's no, you just came out of a place where you were told what to do, when to do it, when to go to bed, when to get up. And after, it takes a moment to put yourself back in to the real world, you might say. And some people had been locked up so long, and coming out, everything was different. There's things happened that they didn't know, telephones. And so it's all very difficult for them to transition quickly. It takes time. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's you're just being worthless. But it takes time and patience to ease them back into the system, because I managed to accept 3 people as once they were paroled to me, and I helped them get back in to a normal routine.
They lived with you, right, Mary? They lived with you, yeah.
They did. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, it's just trust. And once they had gotten a job, I said, well, okay, you have a job now, so you have to pay me rent. And it would be like, well, just a small amount, because regardless of anything, I think a person, if you're going to help a person, let's just say, okay, I'm going to give you something. I think you should give something back in return. And so it helped them to accept responsibility. Okay, you have responsibility of when you get your check, you have to put $20 on the bowl on the dining room table. And it would stay there. And it's like, okay, I trust you not to take that. And so it was very successful. Yeah, and they never returned.
Mm-mm. Would you say something about how the officers treated you when you first got there, and or the kinds of things that you did for the men who lost a family member or something, driving them to the funerals? Or
Yes, well, when I first went there, I went as a sergeant, and it was because I was the first female officer being there. It's extremely difficult for an all-white group, and there was I was the third Black person to be hired there. And so they had a serious problem of taking orders from me, and for at least, I think that pretty much lasted almost a year. And it was really hard. Every day I would think, I can't do this. I'm leaving, and I'd drive home crying. I'm not going back there. And of course, the next morning I'd get up and go right back. I remember moving on a second shift, and it was time to announce dinner. And so you use a microphone. I went to the microphone to do that, and the sergeant at the time, he was sitting on the side reading the newspaper. And when I picked up the microphone to announce it's meal time, he jumped up and he said, "Don't you do that?" No. So it just, he said, "I don't even understand why you're here. You should be home taking care of your family." So it was difficult, but I survived it. It's been a lot of times in my life of just surviving, going through the system. I was in there 25 years.
It's interesting because the next theme that I think, we can weave interweave the themes certainly.
Yeah.
But the next one we were going to talk about was care and caregiving, and actually, Miss Mary, I'm starting sort of where you just left off, in thinking about children, and there's so many places, and so one of the ways that we connect is thinking about ourselves as caregivers and what that means for us, professionally and otherwise. And there's so many different places that in the text where I was thinking about care and caregiving. And one of the places where it was really, sort of a difficult moment was around page 70, where it says, like so many new mothers, Mary was certain that no one could care for her child the way she did. And so her next words are particularly chilling. When I got back home to him, I'm talking about your son here, some of the closeness was gone. And so, and I mention that because, when I say care or caregiving, one could immediately go to thinking about your relationship with the family. But I'm also thinking about the trade-offs of what it meant to care for this family in that way. Yeah.
That's true. Leaving my oldest son at the time to go to Nantucket was extremely hard. And I took him to my mother's, and she cared for him for those 4 weeks. And he had never been away from me. So it was extremely hard on him. And I think he just couldn't, naturally, he was too young to understand why I did that. And it did, the closeness was, when I got back, he was different. And I don't think we actually ever really picked up that type of closeness.
And I think that, I mean, you know, that even though it's sort of early in the text, right, it kind of stayed with me, right? Because I was always thinking about, even as Wendy was talking about who you were with, I was wondering about who you weren't with, you know. And also, I think I was thinking about caring sort of at in the early stages, some of the caregiving we do for young people, and some of the later caregiving. So one of the other things that stood out to me was this moment where, Wendy is upset. And this is, I'm looking at pages 208 and 209. And it says, and when he's talking about you, she says, she showed up when mom needed her, gave up time with her own family, sacrificed her own health. She helped my mother live. And yet here she was bringing alcohol into the house. Mary has been helping my mother kill herself. And I mean, it's striking because I mean, even if I take those words alone, I think about how, I don't know if the word is, what word I want to use is sacred, but how serious the work of accompaniment is in later stages of life, and how important it is to really think about what people want, even if it's not what you would choose for them. And so I was wondering what you were thinking about, you know, sort of that, you know, reading that moment where, you know, or being in that moment, right? You don't have to read it, you were there.
Yeah.
And there was a confrontation. So, you know, like, what, you know, how are you thinking about that in care?
That was Wendy. She was home at the time, and she noticed that the bar was stocked again, and she said, "Oh, you have been bringing this." And I looked at her. At that time, it was later, our mother and I, we had become very close. And so when she would send me the list, I would just like going to the store and filling it. And then I said to Wendy, you don't seem to understand. I'm the help. I'm not the daughter. So I have no choice in this matter. Although I don't like it, but there's nothing that I can do about it.
Yeah, people will think that we prepared this, because that goes smoothly into the next quote that I was thinking about care, which is about this place, is, you know, as Wendy's father is aging, where there's a question of, are you the daughter? I mean, you know, so I'm gonna, again, for people who have the text, I'll say that I'm looking at page 224, and the quote is, just recently in 2020, Mary revealed that after both my brother and I begged off helping Dad with his cataract surgery, he asked her to fly down from New Jersey to care for him. To do so, Mary stretched her vacation time from the correction center so thin that a colleague had to jump in and cover for her. And still, she nearly lost her job. Mary says she is glad she went. During her ministrations after the surgery, Dad told her he felt like he had a second daughter.
Yes, I do remember that. Um, so he said, Mary, I just really need you. Can you come? There's no one else here to go with me. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I remember calling the airlines, and I think the ticket at that time was almost $400 flying from New Jersey to Florida. Of course, I said, oh, what can I do? I said, it's an emergency. I actually said to the airline, it's a family member is sickness, and this is why I need to get the first flight out. So actually the ticket was lowered, and so I did. I got there, and I took him. It was I stayed with him. Didn't I stay a week? I think I stayed there a whole week with him and we got someone else to come in after I was there the first week, because I had to get back for my job. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, and I'll just say a couple other things about care, but there are all these reflections on care. I mean, because then I go to thinking about, I don't know if, I'm not sure if the right word is self-care, but there's a place, and here I'm looking at page 277, where Wendy is reflecting on the wear on the body of the kind of work that you've been doing. And she says, you know, the bottom line for me is that Mary has suffered far more illness and chronic conditions than I. She's 4 years older than I am, but she seems older by much more. And this may be biologically true. And this is, you were having some aches and getting in and out of vehicles at this point. So that's part of the reference there. But so all, you know, and I think especially from that early section about your son, I'm sort of through the book thinking about shifting between thinking about your care for this family, your care of yourself, your care of your family, and then to hear, you know, and I think it's striking to know that was that kind of second daughter thing was invoked late in that, at that period of really, you know, need. And I mean, I think that you know, it's this play on family and friendship. And even though family isn't in the title, I mean, even as you talk about, there's reference to a sort of sisterhood at different places in the text. And so it's really sort of an interesting way to reflect on it. And I'll just refer to two other things that really came up for me as I was thinking about care. One is on page 287, and this is where you get this is one of Wendy's father's friends is writing to you just to say that he truly loved you, you know. And so that's in the letter, and thinking about that, and thinking about what is love, what is love, and how can you see it, how can you know it, you know, what does it look a certain way? I mean, people talk about sort of multiple languages of love, but it is challenging, because in so much of this text we see love and also we see abuse. So, you know, thinking about that, love, abuse, and care, I think is really with me. And then this last thing I'll read is on page 294, and this is a quote from you, and you're talking to Wendy, and you say, "It's a double-edged thing, Wendy. You're one of the family, and then again, you aren't. When your mother died, it was the same for me as if I had lost my own mother. none of you seem to realize that, not your father or Kopi or you were all too busy. Just in there, because, in terms of talking about care, but wondering, if you have any sort of final thoughts about just thinking about care and caregiving and what this life of caring for this family is meant for your care of yourself and your own family.
Well, I think mainly through the years, I've always probably put, when Wendy's parents were alive, I put them first over what I had to do or what I was doing. And you'll see in the book in the early pages, Wendy's dad was, I don't, he definitely didn't think of me as being anything other than there to do a job. And it just evolved through the years that I guess in the last year of his life, he just became, closeness developed there. And I think he might have called me friend or whatever. He wouldn't let anyone else care for him. It's like, so then I felt when the night before Wendy's mother passed and she wanted to see me and I was talking to her, she asked me to take care of him. And so I said, all right, I'll take care of him. And so I kept my promise to her. I always kept my promise to her when she was alive. If I promised her something, I would do it. And so that's my life now. If I promise you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And even in the prison system, it was like, if it was no today, it was no tomorrow, next week, next month. And I always was consistent. I wasn't changing. You can't do anything to change my mind. If it's no, it's no. So I've always been that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, one of, sort of the reflection that was with me through the text was really just thinking about, when the promises of time and care, which is really so much of what caregiving is, you can't be with, in two places with, sort of care, like there are these trade-offs that are sort of inevitable. And I'm really glad that I'm glad to see. I haven't been with the two of you in the same physical space where we just have a sort of Zoom thing going on, but I think that it's really good to see how you're being, cared for. I can feel the sort of mutual care at this point between the two of you, which is really good. Which gets me to the last thing, and I'll just speak, briefly on this, but which is so one of the other themes that we thought people might engage is thinking about questions of repair, equity, reparation. And so where this really comes up is thinking about the home and the mortgage, and the telling and not telling about the mortgage. And I'll just mention three pages in the book here. First on page 238, and this is after you're in this house and paying this mortgage that you don't know is going to be forgiven, basically. And so on page 238, it says, by not telling, and this is talking about Wendy's dad, by not telling her he planned to forgive the mortgage, and by not accepting her payments, Dad exerted control over Mary to indulge a petty racist whim against her husband. Dad took charge of Mary's financial standing, her level of indebtedness, and her shelter. He withheld the honesty that Mary deserved. He ratcheted up the stress in her life, though he would have said he cared about her. Sharecropping's shadow. And I'll just read the 3 quotes that I'm thinking about and just say how, so that was really striking because it was in this story of 2 women in a sisterhood, and women, there's this, yes, there's the shadow of sharecropping tendencies and also of patriarchy in a way, right? And so just thinking about that. And then also on 244, because this is really, one of the striking pieces is Wendy's decision not to initially share this with you. So in 244, it says, "I wish I had defied my father and told Mary. Until Dad died, Mary would worry each month that she couldn't pay what she owed him. Stress causes illness. Stress kills. Dad's secrecy and my collusion taxed Mary in ways we were too ignorant or oblivious to imagine." And again, I think that, so it's this way in which the gift, Wendy is acknowledging that the gift is also being leveraged in a way that is causing you harm, which makes me think then about care and what the care looks like. And then I'll just read this last thought on reparations, page 246, which says, "A last thought on reparations. Real reparations will require more of wealthy white Americans than what seemed generous to me in the 1990s when Dad forgave the mortgage. Even though my brother and I do honor Mary's care for our parents and our love for her by sending her money regularly, when you add it all up, when we have not given anything close to an amount that would reflect my father's recognition at the time of his eye surgery that he felt he had a second daughter." And then I'll just pause there and see, if either of you want to reflect on sort of how you've engaged sort of questions of repair and equity in the context of your relationship, given the unevenness.
Wendy?
Mary, that's such a big, important question. And I'm looking at the time, so I don't want to duck it. I just would really want to engage it.
Well, we can pause and, sort of open here if you want to.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you've taught me so much, Melchor, about reparations being as much the spirit as the spirit of it and the relationship of it as the fact or the amount or whatever. And it would be fascinating for the 3 of us to talk about that in the context of Mary's and my ongoing relationship, because she's 82, I'm 77, but it's going on. And the relation, anyway, it's just, I think we're out of time to go deep into that. It's a really good question. I'm just, the train's going by, so I'm going to turn. How about you, Mary? Your thoughts?
No, I don't have any at the moment on that.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, one of the things that I think about is a lot of times when people ask, well, what is reparations? It's sort of full repair as defined by the person who was in some way harmed. And so when you think about it in that way, it really does have to be rooted in this kind of friendship or sisterhood, or, it has to be more than some calculation that was, some amount that was calculated. And so I think that it's really sort of through this kind of relationship there, you even begin to have the potential for repair. And so I'll just note that. as we shift to opening up for questions and reflection. And so I'm going to invite you, I'm going to repeat the themes that we talked about today. So we began with thinking about co-creation, then shifted to talking about following a leading. We then moved to talking about friendship. We talked about corrections, the correction system. We talked about care and caregiving. And then we also talked about repair and equity. I mentioned those themes because we want to invite you to think about and reflect on those themes and questions that arise as you think through the lens of those themes. Sometimes, I mean, we don't have that much time left anyway, but sometimes there can be an inclination to sort of fill in all of the holes of the story, right? A sort of move to interrogate, the other. And so we just want to invite instead a deeper reflection about those themes and questions that arise for you, maybe that can be answered, or maybe larger questions that you'd like for us all to ponder connected to those. So maybe we'll just pause for a couple of moments to just reflect on the conversation we've had and then open it up after that. All right, so you are now able to unmute yourself. If you had tried it earlier, you would have noted that it wasn't working. You're able to put something in the chat. We're here because we want to have rich conversations about the text. So please, you can physically raise your hand. You can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. You can put something in the chat. We want to know how you're engaging the text. Yes. I don't, so Anna Hill, I think is the name that I see first.
Hi. Thank you all so much. I'm going to be thinking about a lot for a really long time, but a question that was coming up for me in the co-creation and in the friendship and throughout, but especially in those, is how do you both, or like, in what ways do you think your all's relationship has been formed by like the attempt to represent it and like with the book, I guess, or to like make sense of it, especially textually? Like, how has that like changed the relationship itself? Or has it at all like had an effect on how you all relate to each other? If that is like clear enough.
I can start if you want me to, Mary, but it looks like maybe you have something you want to say.
No, go ahead.
It's such an interesting question. I think that it became for a long time the stuff of our friendship, some of the stuff of our friendship. I mean, it's like, once I was like so dedicated to writing this book that Mary thought of, and I kept having to try all these different approaches to make it be as good as it could be, then we had to talk a lot. And I sometimes think that was Spirit's way of inviting me deeper into this friendship, and that's just as important as the book that came out of it. So it really did, I think. And as I said earlier, this part, the promotions part, or the spreading the word, or letting people know about the book, you know, we talk about that a lot too. So it's just brought us together a lot, I guess, is what trying to make a short answer.
I'd say it's brought me in the picture. You know, like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I would have gone and visited Miss Mary anyway, but it's been lovely, I think, you know, being able to have these conversations. So I'm thankful that you all made this decision. Jonathan Slocum, I think, is the next person.
Hello, Lena, I can't turn my camera on. So I'm not trying to hide, but I can't turn it on right now. I really appreciate the conversation you've had. It's been fascinating. And the question I wanted to ask was about the religious background. How has this friendship and the struggles you've been through together informed you, Wendy, as far as Quaker testimonies are concerned? Mary, are you still a Methodist, or
Yes.
and how has that affected you? And then the second thing would be, it sounds like, Wendy, and you've done a lot of reading about the recent literature about racism and discussed it with Mary. So I'd like to know how you both feel about those writings. Do they even begin to touch the depth of that your friendship has? Does it really get to the heart of the matter?
Well, I don't want to wait too long to answer because we don't have much time. I would just say that I'm picking up on the second part of your question. I just think as white people, you know, that it's like if you go to anti-racism, a white group that's trying to learn how to be active anti-racists, they say, learn all you can, but don't tax the people of color in your life with teaching you. They have better things to do with their time. And that really informed my going to all the books that I've gone to and read them. And I think it was partly out of loving Mary and wanting to understand better. It's also a justice issue. And it's an ignorance issue, where white people in white supremacy culture are raised to be so ignorant of how other people live, and it's like just moving out of that is a really important step. And for me, it allowed me, I hope, to be a more dependable friend. But I think for all of us, it's just to move out of that ignorance, because the ignorance is on purpose. It's socially constructed. Mm-hmm. So that's the piece of your question. I know you asked other stuff. I think, and Quakerism. Yeah, I think that working on this book really deepened my Quakerism. Just to experience a leading for that long in that humbling way. So. And I've been to church with Mary. We both been to church with each other.
So I want to make sure we get to some of the questions that are in the chat. So one of them is, well, a prompt is, I would like to hear more about culturally prescribed limits of love. So I don't know if either of you wants to say anything about that.
I'm looking for a signal from Mary. Do you want to sit down?
And it could be no, that you don't want to say anything.
Well, it's just in another group that we had, the lady said she had a Black friend and she wanted to know how to be closer or to her because she wanted to be closer to her. And Wendy and I it's just, it really, she can say anything to me and I can say anything to her. It's no more, to me, it's no different than if I were talking to my sister. And actually, Wendy and I, we're almost closer than I am to my sister. So,
It's a politics.
ex- well, yes, that's true too. So it's just, if you want to be a friend to a Black person, just just talk to them as if like you talk to your other white friends, and you'll find that it's not really a whole lot of difference. But a lot of people don't want to do that. And if you think about it, if you just look back at children, they don't see color when they're small. Because I remember my oldest son, when I think he became aware of a big difference. I think he was in the 2nd grade. And he came home and he said, "Mommy, what color am I?" So I'm not really sure exactly what happened up there at Landon School, which he was in New Jersey, because we lived in New Jersey for years. And usually around the 1st or 2nd grade, that's when children, through their parents, start with the difference. And it just follows them all through their lives. And I just feel with anyone that's on this Zoom, I think I could be a friend to you. We could talk and interact, and I think you would be surprised.
Yeah, and the segregation of our lives is so intense. That's part of what that brings up for me. I see there's someone who's raised their hand whose name is P. Quick
Yes.
Hall.
And it's also the person who did that question, but I want to make sure at least we read these other 2 questions. So especially since, and so to those of you who are on the call, that is my mother, and she has Miss Norman's phone number. So she could ask questions later. I'm not being rude. Or maybe I am, but that's fine. So there are 2 other questions that are in the chat. Can friendship itself be a form of reparation? And then when Mary experiences a microaggression from Wendy, how do you handle that between you? And I think those 2 can be sort of answered together if you all have reflections on that.
Wendy?
Well, the most recent one was when I told you, because you're in so much pain all the time, Holly and I were going to stay in a hotel.
Oh,
That was, and we're going down to see Mary in 2 weeks. We're driving down, first time in three years. And I just really was convinced we should stay at a motel, because Mary would clean house and then she'd be in a lot of pain. And we had this really excellent conversation in which you said, "I'm in pain all the time anyway," number one. And number 2, I would be so hurt if you stayed at a motel. And so that's so often with things that hurt someone you care about, they don't tell you so fast. And so if there were a microaggression that happened, it might just go underground for a while. This one was just right up there. I was just really insulting the depth of our friendship by saying I would stay elsewhere. So I don't know if that's a good example, but that's the one that comes to my mind.
yeah, because, well, Wendy, with that one, I was really confused. I said, "Well, why are you staying in the hotel?" I said, "I don't have any cleaning to do. It's different that I'm not, I'm retired now. I don't have to like do any the house. You can come and if you want to clean something, I'll let you clean something, but clean." And I told her, I says, "Well, like one visit I was really sick."
You were really sick that one.
So I just said, well, here, you do whatever. So she and Polly did the cooking, and so going to the store, they did the grocery shopping and all, because I had been too ill to go. So, but still, that way we were able to have a nice visit.
Yeah.
And that sets up perfectly this last comment from my friends Carol and Joanne. Hi. And
I want to tell you, they and Polly are my longtime Quaker clearness and support group for this leading. So hi, Joanne and Carolyn.
So in the chat, an aspect of friendship that I found profound is Mary needing to tell. And that one aspect of friendship that seemed profound to me was when Mary had to tell Wendy that they would never be real friends if she kept walking on eggshells. How brave was that? Was that hard, Mary? And we'll let you have the final word before you all share about future ways people can access the book.
Now, that wasn't hard, because she would stand in the doorway, and I remember the first time that she said block, she turned all red, and I said, what's wrong? I said, if you can't just talk to me and ask questions, that was way back. I said, you'll never know. So we broke that down there, and then it was just open.
Awesome. And I don't know, Wendy, and I don't know if you want to share some things. I mean, this is the beginning of what we hope that you all will have all sorts of book groups and book talks, and invite the two of them to come and speak and engage and continue the work. And so, Wendy, I don't know if you're prepared to share some of what's coming up and how people can get the book. I know Lena's going to put some information in the chat for us.
Yeah, thank you. Lena's going to put the website in the chat, and you can order the book through the website. I mean, there's some bookstores listed. Amazon is the lowest on the list, but I had to put that in too. And we do visit book groups. Thanks, Lena. And it's for sale, you know, in bookstores, and it's so great. People are asking their libraries to order it, and libraries are ordering it. And some of my Quaker friends have found it at their local library and weren't even the ones who ordered it. So it's like this is not a book that got big media attention. But it's getting wonderful Quaker attention. I really love that. And so, yeah, anything people can do to just share it with their friends or with a book group or ask their library for it, or would be great. Because if you read it and find it's useful, then please spread it. I mean, obviously don't spread it just for me and Ms. Mary, but and I should say that a certain percentage of any money that comes in from the book goes, we've decided, in fact, the first check went to the Equal Justice Initiative. We sent them, we're not going to make this book is not going to make a lot of money, but whatever it makes, a portion of it will go to Brian Stevenson, who's both of our hero.
Yes, he's my hero.
Thank you all. I don't know, Lena, if you have any